Okay, so welcome to our resume series this semester. This is our first event to be followed by at least 5 more. The next on the schedule is with Thomas Yansel on October 10th. And then, this is not yet announced, but since we came and with this privileged position of having access to WhatsApp, on the 30th of October, Elena.
Wow.
Not the first time, already.
So, sorry to kind of run so far ahead of our schedule, but today with us is Anna Starobinets and Katherine E, whose book in the original and in translation we will hear in both languages, and also we will discuss and will, as always, culminate with your questions and Q&A at the end. So, a journalist, scriptwriter, and novelist, Anna Starobinets, who's often called, I'm reading the biography of you, the title said, Russia's queen of horror, describes herself as writing horror supernatural fiction for adults, and also fairy tales and detective stories for children. At least 9 of her books, including 5 titles for children, exist already in English. I don't know if this one is included.
No, it's not.
Right. So, more in reality. And her work has been translated into other languages as well. She's currently living in away from Russia, in Georgia, where she just arrived from 3 days ago. Look at Him, the memoir we are discussing today, was a finalist for Russia's 2018 National Bestseller Prize. The book describes the author's or the narrator's struggle to find sympathy, community, and psychological support for herself and her family after the loss of her unborn son, so fatal birth defect. Its publication ignited, as you can imagine, firestorm in Russia, prompting both high praise and severe condemnation, just for the author's willingness to bring up such long-taboo issues and discuss them publicly, such issues as marriage and family life, callousness and ignorance displayed in Russian society very often towards a situation like this. The memoir has also been credited with helping change the way medical practitioners in Russia now treat pregnancy, pregnant women. So, Anna's translator, Katherine E, is herself the author of poetry collections. Among those, Woman Drinking Absinthe and Day of the Border Guards. She served as the inaugural poet laureate for Arlington, Virginia. That's very easy. She's translated Russian language prose from not only Russia but also from Azerbaijan, and poetry from Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. Her translations have earned international awards from the Chanin Foundation, Pushkin House in London, National Endowment for the Arts, among many others. Young's translation of the book we are discussing tonight, Look at Him, by Anna Starobinets, was awarded the honorable mention for the Health Prize for Best Translation in Slavic History and Eurasian Women and Gender Studies by the Association for Women in Slavic Studies, which is, I think, an offshoot of the Slavic Association for Slavic Studies. So, we will start with probably Anna and Katherine saying just a few words before reading excerpts from this book, and we will finish with questions from myself, which I will probably begin our Q&A with, and look forward to everything that you want to say. Okay, thank you so much for making it happen, helping us start the series this fall, and let's welcome Anna and Hunter. We hope to see you again before this is even over.
Shall I talk about the first part of the book? Okay, so welcome everybody. I would also like to say thanks to Olga Butina, who made the connection that made it possible for us to come here So we're really, really happy to be here. I am. I hope you are.
Me too.
Okay. Just so we have that clear. So the book starts, the very first chapter of the book starts at a perfectly normal ultrasound at the 16th week of pregnancy in a private gynecological clinic in Moscow. Or maybe it was a special ultrasound clinic. And the ultrasound doctor sees something that doesn't look right. And what he sees that doesn't look right is that the baby's kidneys are very, very big, like 5 times the size of normal kidneys. This at 16 weeks, it's still not entirely clear what's going on, but something very bad is going on. So for the first part of the book, Anna and her family are going through the process of just trying to figure out what is wrong. There are several different. There is a long and harrowing visit to another ultrasound doctor that is highly abusive of the patient and her privacy. And then there is a specialist found to see if they can confirm the diagnosis. Long story short, the diagnosis is polycystic kidney disease. It turns out that's not exactly what the baby has, but it's close enough. And what it means is there are big cysts in the kidneys. They swell up, they fill the stomach area of the child, and they compress the lungs. So the lungs cannot develop. So when a child is born with this genetic disorder, the child cannot survive because the lungs have not survived, and there's been no amniotic fluid in the pregnancy. It's possible to live past birth, but not for long, minutes, hours, but not long. So it's a fatal birth defect. And because of the influence of the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia, I think it was 2004, the laws were changed so that you cannot get an abortion after 12 weeks. Mind you, this visit to the doctor's office when the first evidence of the fatal birth defects happened was at 16 weeks. And by the time they could confirm what was wrong, it was 18 weeks. And then they went to a second specialist, I think at 20 weeks.
20.
Yeah. And then they were faced with what to do. To do something about it in Russia, there was only one place that could do a medical abortion, and it was under not less than ideal circumstances. And so the choice was to do that, or possibly to collect a lot of money and go somewhere abroad, Israel or Germany.
Yeah. Actually, the point is that if you are okay with your pregnancy, you can use just any private clinic you like, if you have enough money for that, and everything will be very European-like, or I don't know, American-like maybe. But if something goes wrong, you immediately find yourself in государственное, in state clinic, and it has. The state clinic has its own rules, which are very Soviet. Actually, they are preserved since Soviet times, and we call that punitive medical system. Is that correct?
That sounds
like, and there were two spheres in Soviet medical system, which were the most cruel. Those were gynecology and psychiatry. They were like the most punitive. So I found myself in one of those first, and then in the second as well. The problem is that you actually absolutely lose control over your body and your decisions, because it seems that you don't have any choice, because the doctors tell you that there is no choice of prolonging that pregnancy. For instance, I'm not religious, but still I would really love to have the choice, at least because that may be harmful for your health, and of course it is very harmful for your psychological state if you have to if you have to terminate the pregnancy in the middle of it. But it turned out to be no choice at all, and the methods that they used were very like, how to put that?
Punitive.
Yeah, actually, yeah, punitive. And so, shall we?
Yes, I will just say that at the point where we're about to start reading, the money is being collected just in case they have to go to Germany or Israel or somewhere like that. But if the visas don't work out, if they can't get the money, they'll have to go through the punitive Russian system. And the first step of that is to go to your local gynecological clinic, which is, it's a completely different health system than what we have here, but that's the sort of entry point for all women. It's based on where you live. It's like your local library or something like that. That's the point of entry into the healthcare system for pregnant women. I'm seeing people grimace at that. It's not like your library at all. It's a very different thing. But that's how you access healthcare for a woman into the women's clinic. So Anna's going to read just a little bit in Russian, and they are going. So they think they're going abroad, but they're not sure they can do it, and so they're seeing what the Russian system is like.
Глава 6 называется «Других родишь». С мужчинами нельзя. Мрачный крепыш в сером свитере преграждает нам путь. Это охранник. Он охраняет районную женскую консультацию хамовников. От мужчин. Это мой муж, говорю я. С мужчинами нельзя, скучно повторяет охранник. Такие правила. «Пропустите меня, пожалуйста», — говорит муж. Он, кажется, искренне верит, что мрачному человеку в мышином свитере можно что-то объяснить. У нас серьезная ситуация, действительно серьезная. Нам нужно поговорить с врачом вместе. Мужчинам сюда нельзя, мужчина. Охранник широко расставляет ноги, как бы демонстрируя, что никакая сила в мире не помешает ему честно выполнять свой долг. Это женское учреждение. Пусть женщина идет одна, а вы пока присядьте здесь, на банкеточке. Мы садимся, мы сдаемся. Муж присаживается на банкеточке, я иду одна. Поднимаюсь на второй этаж и сажусь на другую банкеточку, напротив кабинета врача, в бесконечную женскую очередь. Какие правила? Мужчинам нельзя. Мужчины здесь ни при чем. Мужчин нельзя подпускать к женским учреждениям, к женским болезням и бедам. Так думает тот, кто сочинил эти правила. Так думают сами женщины в очереди. Так думает врач в консультации. Так думает моя мать. Когда она узнала, что я хочу, чтобы Саша был со мной рядом на искусственных родах, она пришла в ужас. Ты что, хочешь еще и мужа лишиться? Зачем ему этот кошмар? Мужчины после такого сбегают.
Chapter 6. You'll have others. No men allowed. The gloomy, muscle-bound man in the gray sweater bars our way. He's a guard. He guards the district gynecological clinic in Khamovnik. From men. This is my husband, I say. No men allowed, the guard repeats in a bored voice. Those are the rules. Please let me in, says my husband. It seems he sincerely believes that it's possible to explain things to the gloomy man in the mouse-colored sweater. We have a really serious situation, truly serious. We need to speak to the doctor together. No men are allowed here, mister. The guard plants his feet widely apart as if to demonstrate that no power in the world will disturb him from faithfully executing his duties. This is a woman's institution. Let the woman go alone. While you wait, have a seat here on the bench. We give up. My husband sits on the bench and I go alone. I climb to the second floor and sit on a different bench across from the doctor's office in an endless line of women. Those are the rules. No men allowed. Men have nothing to do with this. No men allowed to come close to women's institutions, to women's illnesses and woes. That's how the people who devised those rules think. That's how the women in the line think themselves. That's how the doctor in the clinic thinks. That's how my mother thinks. When she found out that I wanted Sasha to be next to me at the induced birth, she was horrified. You want to lose your husband too, do you? Why does he need to see that nightmare? Men disappear after that kind of thing. The obstetrician gynecologist serving my microdistrict is, in essence, a good woman. Hearing about polycystic kidney disease, it seems she sympathizes with me absolutely sincerely, and she even tries to comfort me as best she can. She unleashes a flood of folk wisdom on me, most of which I've already encountered in chat rooms. She says, "Don't cry. You're still young. You'll have another one, a healthy one." She says, "You'll terminate now, and in a year you'll be pregnant again. You won't be struck by bad luck twice." She says, "God tests us according to our strength. If he gave this burden to you, it means that you can bear it." Then she says, I have to immediately go through a medical council to receive permission for termination and check into the specialized hospital. She looks for my pregnancy checkup record and can't find it. There is no record. That's entirely my fault. I really had registered the pregnancy at 8 weeks, but I didn't go to the clinic after that, preferring those private doctors to her, and naturally, during that period, my record disappeared. But she forgives me. Now we'll quickly set up a new one for me, because I have to immediately be registered anew. So look, this is what we'll do. You go downstairs now to the registration desk, and they'll set up a new checkup record for you. Then you'll come back here, I'll register you again and give you a medical referral. With it, you visit the doctors in the district polyclinic, the therapist, the dental surgeon, cardiologist, because your pulse is simply racing, the otolaryngologist, the optician. They have to fill out this checklist. Bring it back here. Otherwise, without this checklist, I can't hand you the checkup record. And your husband also has to go and get an x-ray of his lungs. Then we can convene the council and... I still haven't decided, I say quietly. What haven't you decided? Whether I'm going to terminate this pregnancy. They told me that if there's any amniotic fluid left in 2 weeks, then there's a chance. What are you talking about? Barks the good woman, but immediately softens. As before, she's sorry for me. She looks at me as if I'm crazy, as if I'm an insane Ophelia who plaits daisies in her tangled hair, singing to herself, instead of running immediately to the district polyclinic with the checklist. She hasn't decided. She has a child. Do you even understand what will happen in your life if you have this child? You'll be completely disabled, very seriously disabled, a freak, and you'll be all alone with him. Don't you know husbands don't stick around long with one of these kinds of children? Don't even think about it. Later, you'll have a healthy one. So, now, off you go, the registration. But all the same, if the amniotic fluid remains, I plan to have this child. It'll be clear in 2 weeks. If the fluid remains, 2 weeks? You don't have 2 weeks. The clock is ticking. In 2 weeks, he'll probably already weigh 500 grams. And when they weigh 500 grams, by law, the doctors have to save them. Do you understand? Say you have him. They'll torment him, resuscitate him, and all the same, he won't be able to survive. Do you need all that? And if he weighs less than 500 grams? Unexpectedly inquires that other businesslike and collected me. Then what? Then he'll be born dead, says the good woman. And now, go to the first floor to the registration desk and set up your checkup record. I go to the registration desk, icy and somehow not fully whole, like a piece of wood that snaps in frost. Opposite the registration desk, my husband sits on the bench. Well, he leaps up. I have to set up a checkup record, I say stupidly. The benevolent old lady behind the registration desk enters my information into the computer. How long have you been pregnant? 16 weeks. She presents me with some kind of paper with which I have to go back upstairs to the gynecologist's office, and a gift pack. In it is a sample of cream for stretch marks, an advertising brochure for the maternity hospital, and a disposable diaper. I look at the disposable diaper. I look at it a long time, so long that the wooden and businesslike me manages to get bored and disappears somewhere. And the overwhelmed and spineless me begins to cry and to say to Big Badger, my husband, I don't want to kill him. I want to have him and put this diaper on him. The baby inside me shudders slightly, like a moth caught in your hand. Ma'am, we have pregnant women here, says some woman in a white lab coat, who up until now has been silently observing us reproachfully. And look how you're carrying on. Big Badger stands between her and me, and he hugs me. He strokes my head, and he whispers, let's get out of here. For that, he sat there on the bench 2 hours, so he could hug me and take me away from that woman's hell into the cold autumn darkness where people of both sexes can go. That same evening, my parents, who until now thought the idea of running away to charity in Berlin was absurd, call and say they can give us a large part of the necessary sum. They've also read the stories in the chat rooms about late termination of pregnancy. Friends promise to lend us the rest of the money. We buy airplane tickets online. By some astonishing coincidence, the cheapest turn out to be for that same day when we have the final ultrasound scheduled with Dr. Malmberg. We decide what to do. We'll take our suitcases to the ultrasound. If the amniotic fluid remains, we'll simply lose the cost of the tickets. If there's no fluid, we'll go straight from the clinic to the airport. Little Badger will stay with my parents. Unfortunately, folks, almost no amniotic fluid remains, says the doctor. We go to the airport through a slush of snow and mud. We sit on the plane. In the window is dark, icy emptiness. Usually I'm very scared of flying, but I'm not afraid now. It doesn't matter to me whether the airplane crashes or not. I've already crashed. Questions?
So, thank you so much. The book, other than the memoir itself, also has a second part, right, which is more oral history of sorts.
Interviews.
Yeah. What do you think of combination, combining such a personal and intimate story with, and amplifying it with people who not necessarily have anything to do with this story itself, but runs into the topic?
I'm not sure there is the second part in the English.
It is.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I wrote that book, it was very hard for my literary agent to find a publishing house for that. Because normally I write either books for kids, like Beastly Crimes Chronicles, books about badgers and badger cats and various beastly crimes in the woods. So it's funny and okay. Or I write sci-fi for adults, dystopias, various like mysterious short stories, and I have never written any non-fiction documentary books before, and of course, I never ever had I written that dark and scary thing. So actually, that didn't correspond to what was to what publishers normally wait from me, and And anyways, it seemed too dark, and it was dark. So the only brave publisher that decided to take that text and to publish it, she tried somehow to soften maybe that. She wanted something something that readers maybe find more, I don't know, comfortable. So she asked me to make it. At that time, I was also a journalist, not only a writer. I worked in a magazine, and so I was good at making interviews actually. So she asked me to make the second part, also documentary, but she asked for the interviews with Russian doctors and with German doctors, because the story ends with, actually, by the time that this book was published, I already had another, like this lady was right, because after that I had another baby who was healthy, and still it was very hard for me to come back to all those places to talk to the doctors. Now, not as a pregnant woman, but as a journalist. But I did that. I'm not sure, actually, I'm still not sure that that part was necessary. Although I think the result was very interesting, because none of the Russian doctors and clinics agreed to talk to me about that. I think I even wrote that in that second part. There was a short notice. Yes, there is just. I made a phone call to that clinic where I was supposed to have the to have my pregnancy termination if I made it in Russia. They asked me to inquire properly to write them a formal email, which I did, and well, they refused. Like no one was ready to talk on the topic, because it is really a taboo. That was the reason why the book was criticized, and that was the reason they were all silent. So I went to Germany, and all those doctors in Charité, where I terminated the pregnancy, were very eager to talk to me, and they showed me around, and so I knew much more than I knew when I was that woman. I knew that they had a lot of research. For instance, the book is called "Look at Him" because in Germany they kept proposing that I should look at the baby after the pregnancy is terminated. And I was very afraid of that, and I was sure that I'll have nightmares all my life after that. But afterwards, it turned out in the interviews that they had a huge research, psychological research, about how women feel if they do look at those babies and if they don't. And it turned out that those who refuse to have a look, they have a lot of psychological problems afterwards, and they keep coming back, and in their mind and physically coming back to that clinic where they lost the baby. So, so the second part was also very, very interesting, and very and the fact that Russian doctors refused to talk, it was actually the part of the whole story.
To soften
Soften.
the softened writing.
So,
Do you mean soften, or do you mean just make it less bleak? I think would be a better way to put it.
No. That was not censorship actually, and also by that time we had no censorship. Now we have a lot of it, but that time no, she was just looking for a way of how on earth is she supposed to sell this book. Actually, it was sold very good in Russia because it was because no one wrote about that stuff before, and no one wrote about the whole approach to the woman, not necessarily to the woman who is carrying a child with bad diagnosis. Just even if you're a normal pregnant woman but don't have enough money for private clinics, if you go to that system, governmental system, you get all of that anyway. As for the censorship, you're not obliged to ask me only questions about this book. So if somebody is interested in censorship, I can tell a lot of, I can tell some stories about that as well.
Do you want to follow up on that, or?
I would love to. Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Well, we have a lot. Do you mind if I tell about that? But then I think we somehow go back to this topic. We recently in Russia appeared a lot of new laws, and some of them also they are for a very long time. Literature was a safe space. Actually, cinema, films, were already censored, and of course all the journalism. But books were not supposed to be a great deal. Actually, no one cared about the books. You could write whatever you want. But now finally, the idea came to their mind that probably books are dangerous. Like with Bradbury with his books on fire. So a lot of books are now, so to say, on fire. First of all, we have a law about the LGBTQ plus propaganda. If you say anything about, propaganda is just mentioning that is immediately propaganda. First, it concerns only the communication with kids. The writer could not write about anything connected to LGBTQ in the books for kids. And by the way, I was even a little bit accused in propaganda because one of the characters in my book for kids is a badger cat. His problem is that he doesn't know if he's a badger or a cat. And there were some parents, by the way, not some special censors. They were just parents who were worried a lot about that fact. And they were writing to my publisher asking if what we actually imply. Is it that stuff coming from the USA, when you can be whatever you want? So, but that was okay. At that point, at least I couldn't go to prison for that. Now it is worse, and now you cannot mention. It doesn't matter if the book is for kids or for adults. You cannot mention any LGBT topics or problems. So the book I'm currently working on is sci-fi, actually, about not verbose shapeshifters. Is that correct? When a person turns into various animals, for instance, not necessarily wolves, but it is about shapeshifters, and it is a story for young adults. So there are there are two characters, two teenage guys who are good friends, but when they shift into horses, they are horses of two different genders, and they fall in love as horses. But then when they become people again, they have some tension because of that horse story. And now no one can publish this book because the publisher would go directly to prison. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe not to prison, maybe she will just close her publishing house and they will somehow forgive her. And also there is another reason why it's also about censorship. There is some army, I even wrote it down. Yes, it's the same. There is some Russian army and government discrediting. There's also a new law about that it's prohibited to discredit Russian army. Actually, discrediting Russian army is saying anything about Russian army but for its being great. So I'm a little bit discrediting because some of the characters don't like the Russian army and they discuss it a lot in that story. Actually, the story, the name of the story is, I think in English that would be Huntsman, the Huntsman. So it is a little bit as in Narnia Chronicles, when there is a fairy tale, but the action unfolds against the background of some real war. And in my story, the real war is the one between Russia and Ukraine, which is also prohibited because, as you maybe know, the world war is somehow prohibited, and peace as well. So there's no chance that this book is going to be published, but it is very interesting what the reaction would be because I signed the contract before the war started and before all those laws were taken, and I took the money from the publisher, but then all the laws changed. So lucky enough, I don't live in Russia anymore. But I think maybe they go, I don't know, it's just funny, I want to know what they are going to do. Maybe they go to court or something. So that was a little bit about censorship.
A lot.
You actually published this book in Russia, but just name it like a patriotic edition and change all the stuff to.
That is my great concern, actually. I think
the characters discussing the war would tell the great stuff about it, and obviously call it special.
Yeah, you are joking, but they can do that. I'm really afraid they will do that.
Dystopias, of course, which are always known for modeling the language and the communication of the subject. No war, no peace is allowed, then it's the opposite. It will be war or unpeace, or formal. And in this book, which is of course a memoir and earlier a whole different genre, I want to ask Catherine what was the most difficult even in this short excerpt that you read, I must found one phrase for myself that sounds very vernacular, very everyday, but at the same time very important. Like, мужчина нельзя, мужчина. Right? Translators obviously can say no men are allowed man. Right? Mr. So is that how much of a challenge?
This book was not that much of a challenge that way. I mean, there were moments, and in fact, we're going to, if we have time, we're going to read you another section that has the hardest challenge, which has a song lyric in Russian that has to be rendered a certain way because the English is the chapter title as well. But translating song lyrics from one culture to another is really, really complicated. And this is even more complicated because it's from The Three Musketeers, which is a French story. It is a Soviet movie being viewed in a German hospital, and now I'm trying to get the song lyrics into English and make it has to rhyme, and it has to be in meter, and it has to have the translation close enough so that the chapter title makes sense. So that one was probably the hardest. But in general, her writing flows really beautifully in Russian, and part of translating is just capturing sort of the tone of what the writer is saying. I mean, I've worked with other writers who write in very different, much more formal and archaic Russian even, but this was just beautiful and flowing, and it felt. I mean, you do clue in, and sometimes you can see the translators clued in a little better than they didn't, but I felt like I was cluing in. The other thing about this particular translation, because of when I did it, there was a complication at the publisher. I don't even remember what it was, but it allowed me the time to read every word in the manuscript aloud twice and parts of it 3 times. Usually I don't have the luxury of doing that. When I work as a poet, I'm always working aloud. I'm always listening for sound. And so when you read these words aloud, you can see that the phrase is really clunky and you really need to do something to fix it. So having that extra time was really helpful in making this particular translation flow. Did I answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I actually thought that, and I want to ask that there was work for someone. And I wanted to ask, since it's the only book that you wrote, what extent writing that book, like, did you write it, but you wrote it to yourself, what extent other people, and what was at which point did you start writing it?
The reason I wrote that book, the short answer is no, I didn't write it for myself. I would rather not. I did it because when I was in Germany, in Charité, we were offered some psychological help, and we had a session, even 2 sessions, with a therapist, right? With a therapist there, and in her room there was a bookshelf full of books on the topic and how to cope with this situation, what to do when your hands are empty, like you were expecting to have a baby and now your hands are empty, and a lot of that, and all the aspects of that. And I don't know, I'm a person of text, like texts help me. If I have some problem, I want to read a text about that. So I tried to find books in Russian on the topic, and there were none. And I thought that that maybe it is kind of a social duty, my social duty, to do that, because at least I'm a writer. Well, I'm not. I never wrote social, any, like, on social topics, books on social topics. but still I'm capable of putting words together in a pretty way. So I thought that maybe it was my duty to be the first actually to talk about that, because that is an awful situation when you are all alone with that, and the only thing you can find is some like endless discussions on forums and on social networks, which are very aggressive, toxic, and I think harmful. So I thought that maybe my personal story would be the and breaking the silence itself would be a good thing to do, because you live with that understanding that all that is happening, and everyone keeps saying, like all the doctors keep saying that is not a big deal actually. Why are you so desperate? Like it's not it's like it's not a person, it's some combination of cells. So you need to somehow to treat that as if you were having, I don't know, cold, a little bit cold, flu. And I think that is that is preserved from Soviet times, when actually abortion was a means of contraception. So it was not a big deal. That is the first thing. Why discussing that is like all women feel that something very wrong is happening if they're making an abortion, but they somehow need to pretend that it is not a big deal. This is the first. And the second is that even from more, I think, ancient, maybe, I don't know, rural times, that everything which is connected to women's physical processes, like everything that happens with you, all the blood, the delivering kids, is something ugly. It is still considered as ugly, at least in that Soviet-style governmental clinics. So that's why you need to keep it to yourself, not to talk about that. So I thought that maybe if I talk about that a little bit, that would help people. That was the reason.
Let me follow up on this parallel between psychology and psychiatry. Of course, at some point, post psychiatry, like Soviet era, was also unknown and taboo, right? And only like people like at some point started speaking about it, and then later, one of them was with her manifestation of the Red Spirit, 68. So it's kind of together from the very beginning, but for psychiatric treatment got publicity and the world found out. Do you think this would be today, of course, no parallel historical periods? Is that something draw attention?
You mean like psychiatrical?
No, the issues that your book is about. The probably much deeper seated taboo from the topic of pregnancy, female process. And this is more specifically Russian.
What would be actually the question?
Do you feel this topic, unlike psychiatry in the Soviet era, would be more difficult to give voice in literature?
In a way, yes, I think, because psychiatry is only this punitive psychiatry is only about the relationship between people, and some like those who regulate your life, and normal common people who need to obey or somehow to oppose something to that. And this gynecological thing is more complicated because there is the opposition is not that simple. It's not that you are a small person opposed to a totalitarian system. There is another. There is this third corner of this. Is kind of a triangle. There is, of course, there is kind of totalitarian approach. Then here you are, a small person, but there is another corner, which is other small persons who think that you are wrong talking about that because it's a shame. And because you are taking the garbage out of, I don't know if there is the English proverb for that. In Russia, there is a very famous proverb: "Don't take the garbage out of your house," meaning that you need to, you need your neighbors should think that everything is okay with you. You have no garbage at all. Of course, you do have some garbage, and you preserve it at home until it's absolutely fully rotten. But good news is that no neighbor see that you had garbage. And that book is like, that is taking the garbage out of the house, and that is not a very good thing to do from the point of view of the neighbors. I mean, so there is like government, you, small person in your small house, and another house with your neighbor who thinks that's a shame.
First of all, it's a kind of doing your dirty laundry. It's an English expression.
Doing
your dirty laundry, you know, in public. That's exactly the same one-to-one, and even more appropriate in all this kind of blood, dirty laundry of the gynecology. But I think, and you know, to stay on this psychiatry, gynecology kind of comparison, a lot of it is the pit power. Like that other person has actually huge power over you.
Of course.
Not really to the person. Is that kind of the big part? And in psychiatry, it's the same thing. That okay, that tremendous power over the patient. Forget about state. Forget about political psychiatry. I used to work in psychiatry clinic for many years. It's without any politics. It's still fantastic power. How that, you know, do you feel the same processes in gynecological kind of thing, like exercising power more than anything else?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that is, of course, a question of power. Although there are some other spheres in medical spheres which give power over your body, like any surgery.
It's not, you know, there's no stigma of having appendicitis.
That's
There's
true.
no stigma having the, I don't know, even brain surgery. Isn't that actually, that has a stigma? But somehow gynecology and psychiatry stigmatize completely. And that's where the power is much easier.
That's
like
true.
What you feel
Yes, I think you are right. That this is also a question of having power, entire like power over someone else's mind or body, and even life. When we talk about like giving birth or anything connected to the ability to give birth, and it is also those two spheres, they give the power of punishing you. Of course, psychiatry gives even more. Like there are various ways of punishing, but gynecology as well. When it was quite a common thing to yell at a woman who was in labor because she had she wasn't supposed to have a right to be upset with, to express that she's in pain, because pain was kind of punishment for pleasure she had before. And the doctor could say, like, why are you crying? You were not crying when you were having sex with a man, were you? So, like, be silent now.
I'm going to say also one of the most terrifying scenes in the memoir, we haven't talked about it, but and it's a memoir full of terrifying scenes, is when at some point Anna goes to a real old school Soviet psychiatrist because she hasn't been able to find the help that she needs to deal with grief and loss.
I think it's funny.
It is funny, but it was also terrifying because basically the psychiatrist is saying we want to lock you up for 3 weeks and pump you full of antidepressants and all kinds of other, because you have an eating disorder, as opposed to you've lost a child and you're grieving and this is perfectly normal. And you had to, at one point, and you had to say to her, I know Russian law. Russian law does not allow you to lock me up without my permission, right? But other women may not know that.
I'm sure there were other women who didn't know that they had the right to go away.
To leave, yeah. No.
But still, I think that the chapter about my attempts, because it is all about punitive gynecology, and there is only one chapter about punitive psychiatry, which is very funny. I think, like, really funny. I think there is a lot of humor in that chapter.
I have a question for Catherine. When did you first encounter Anna's book, and how did you decide to translate it? Like, how did that come about?
So the book was written up by my friend Lisa Hayden, who is an well-known English translator of all things Russian, and she maintains a blog called Lisa's Bookshelf. And she reviewed the book in Russian because of the tremendous controversy. We haven't talked about it, but there was a tremendous controversy when the book came out and was nominated for the National Bestseller Prize. And people were angry and screaming about the book in print. And in any case, she wrote about the book, and I said, I have to get my hands on this book, but I want to translate this book. And I should put this in a little bit of context. In the entire English-speaking world, we have only about 1,000 books published in translation each year. And of those, up until about 10 years ago, 75% were written by men. And that was across the board. And in some languages, there were no books published by women. And that has changed a little bit in the last 4 or 5 years. There's been a concerted effort to get more books by women published in English. And we're now roughly at parity, 48%, 52%, which is an amazing, that was a serious campaign made to get women's writing published by booksellers and translators. And it's called the Women in Translation Month, which we just finished up in August. And there are now a lot of readings and other things associated with that. But so that was a long struggle. But in the Russian sphere, we have, according to Lisa Hayden's statistics, we have roughly 60 books published every year translated from Russian, and a good percentage of those are the classics republished, like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, all that sort of thing. When you break it down, the same transition that we've seen in publishing as a general rule, roughly 50-50, has not happened in Russian. We're still only getting about a third of the books were originally written by women. So when you're talking about 60 books, we get maybe 20 a year. And so, I mean, I wanted to publish a woman writer. I wanted to publish this book. I was very lucky that we were soon after Lisa's review came out, we were in Moscow, and I was able to meet with Anna's agents at the time. But then, so I got permission to translate the book, which is the first step. But then here I am in the United States with a book about abortion. Who is going to publish this book? And it's a book, it's not just about abortion, obviously. It's a book about grief and loss of a child. And that's a very hard concept for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, that these two things together. If you really want a child, you're not going to abort it, right? And then there's the whole question of, people who face this situation, the child is not going to survive. The child is going to die in extreme pain. So how do we regulate that? And especially, how do we talk about that if it happens after your abortion cutoff, which in this country keeps creeping lower and lower and lower. I mean, at 6 weeks, you have no way of knowing this is going to happen to a baby. At 16 weeks, you start to see. And the other thing, of course, is the numbers are quite low. Maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 people in this country need to have this kind of abortion every year, but they need it, right? And this is a story that's not being told in this country, although we're seeing it in some of the lawsuits that are now happening in Texas, because people have to have medical care if their lives are in danger. So for all those reasons, so this was 2018. I translated the book in 2019, and then I had to find a publisher. And I knew I couldn't go with a small independent publisher because I was afraid that it might put them out of business if people reacted badly to the book. So then I found a university publisher, and they had the protection of the university and the university lawyers and that sort of thing. But still, how do you market a book like this? And then it came out in the middle of the pandemic. So we did some Zoom sessions, last summer we were in the UK because somebody put together a conference that was partially focused on this book. So that was the first time we'd had a live audience talking about the book. But this right here is the first, real sort of book tour event that we've had for this book. And it's all this time later. And of course, from my point of view as an American, it's too late for the debate that we needed to have in this country. So it's a very fraught book for me, but obviously it's kind of a passion project.
I had a comment in the question. The comment was about kind of like the translation, unfortunately, concept even more relevant time in the global context, because I mean, like how you were saying, one of the books for other women to relate to their experience if they learned the same thing, and now there's many women in this country it just becomes more and more relevant. But I did have a question about, because this is your first nonfiction book, and your background as both a children's literature writer and also a horror writer, and how this book is sort of an intersection of kind of both of these backgrounds. It's about the loss of a child, and the child won't be able to read your book, for example, and it's also about going through such a horrific event, or several events. Did you have to grapple with that at all, or did that ever come up in the process?
Grapple with.
Like handle, deal with.
You're talking about the emotional baggage of.
Yeah, of like having, like being a writer of these genres and also having.
Maybe a better question might be: Did being a horror writer help you write this book?
No, actually, no, it didn't interfere. Like, for me, I think maybe I would use the metaphor, like, thank you. Everything I write, like, imagine there's a house and it has an attic, a beautiful one with some nice and funny creatures. That is what I do for kids. Then there is a basement with monsters. That monsters and horror creatures, and that is what I do for adults. And there is the house itself, where I lead my life. So this book is actually where I depict my normal. Not normal. I don't do abortions all the time, but my real life. Not the imaginary, not the attic, not the basement. It's just one of the rooms. So somehow nothing. It isn't. Yeah, да, точно. I don't mix that up.
You have a follow-up or no? Yeah.
Okay. I actually kind of jumping back to your question, follow up on that question to you. It's obviously very emotional. Every child, negative, difficult, maybe it's funny, maybe sad, but it's a lot of emotion. How for you as a translator, as a translator, kind of we get into the book, we kind of live in the book when we translate. How was that experience living in that book, reliving that experience of somebody else, but whom you actually know, whom you met?
I have to say I didn't know her at all when I translated the book. We were never afterwards. Yeah.
But okay, scratch that part.
But still,
it's still a question. It doesn't. You don't need to know the person. But it's a contempt. It's not Shakespeare who died a long time ago.
Right.
Somebody who's right here.
So I think you compartmentalize because that's the only way you can deal with something like that. I mean, I don't know how you write about something like that. I mean, I know because I translated it that it can be done, but I don't know how you put yourself in the mind. I mean, you just go to work and you do the work. The other thing I'll say is after a year or so of working on the book and reading it aloud and having it published, we went to do this Zoom event when it was released. Anna had COVID, and it was 2:00 in the morning Moscow time, and she said, "I'll come on for 5 minutes. I'm really sick," and she stayed for over 2 hours. And we talked to people on Zoom about the book, and at the end of it, I said the stupidest thing, and it was just one of those things you say, and what I said was, "But there's a happy ending because she had another child." After all of the time working on this book, how could I be so stupid, right? to say that that's a happy ending. And I feel like translating this book, as translating all the books that I translate, I learn things, not just when I'm doing it, but then afterwards thinking back. I mean, that's the fun part of translating for me. The actual, how do I get this verb into English in the right tense? That's not much fun. But the living, walking in somebody else's footsteps and trying to be empathetic and trying to, see what that teaches me. That's the fun part for me. Yeah.
Following up on that, right, when you first, I mean, I follow Anna on Facebook. I remember but I remember reading about all this. Anyway, like in his first, you can think about it. System, but now looking at what's happening in Russia, and the fact that in the rules society there's no reflection of power, no respect for the life of the human, right? So life or emotion or always so I'm learning from what they're providing. So what do you think both of you, we as people, how do we learn to make this world better, right? Like prevent, counteract government encroaching.
Is that okay? Could you just repeat the ending of the question?
Yeah,
Louder, a bit louder.
Yeah. Okay, sure. No, I'm just like how do in the world, right? That we're especially in this question of like question of power of the government, not only Russia, very much right now, West, how do we, as people learn from Anna's experience and then kind of like create how do we try to create a world from
Well, actually, there was a situation, I'm not sure, no, you are not describing in this book, but the doctor is. There was one of quite monstrous doctors who showed disrespect. I'm pretty sure not only to me, but to all the women who visited him. And he was one of those ultrasound doctors, and he was very rude. There were two guys. One of them invited 15 students to the examination room when he was making the ultrasound. Another one was just yelling because I went to the first guy and his 15 students and didn't wait for him. And when I came back to my husband and I told him about that, and he said, okay, he was very furious about that situation. And he said, okay, I want to, maybe I'll go and do something to him, and maybe I'll beat his face. And I said, no, because by that time, that was the point when I first thought that I will write the book. Maybe not the book, maybe I thought I will write an article or something, but I was pretty sure I'm going to write something. And I said, no, please don't do that. I will beat him with words. I think this book is like fixing things with a very powerful weapon, which is the weapon of words. Actually, after it was published, there were a lot of changes, which surprised me a lot. But it made things better, at least in Russia, at least in Moscow, I'm sorry, not in unfortunately, of course, not in whole Russia, and I'm sure that in some small towns somewhere in Siberia, it's worse, much worse. But in Moscow, they even built a special clinic for women like myself, for pregnant women with unfortunate pregnancies and with babies that had bad prognosis, so that they could deliver them or make an abortion, whatever they want, like, so that would be the place where they could make their own decisions, and the doctors would be obliged to help them, and that help would not depend on what they decided. Because my problem was that they said, if you decide to prolong, we are not going to do it. Like, well, don't come. We don't want to see you anymore, and we are not providing help. So I think that is like, that was the only thing I could. I'm absolutely incapable of anything else but telling stories. So, but it turned out to be quite powerful. Just telling.
Also, one of the guys was
fired. Yeah, one of the guys was. There was a funny. Do you want another funny story about this very funny book? So there was the clinic. There was a private clinic that is also described in the book, because all those ultrasound doctors were settled in it, and I mentioned all the real names of all the doctors and the real title of the clinic, the real names of all those professors. And I was expecting that maybe they will try to sue. They would try to sue me. I'm very sorry for my very poor English. I haven't used it for quite a long time, but I'm doing my best. So so I mentioned the real names, and I even was not really afraid of that maybe they'll go to court and sue me. I thought that maybe that would give even more publicity to the book. But I was curious if they are going to do that. And I was especially curious about those 15 students that were invited to the room. I was wondering if that would be the case. I was wondering if they would betray his professor and say, like, yes, we were present, that is true. Because I was sure he will say I'm lying. I had no proofs. I didn't make any recording of that or anything. So I thought that this is how it goes. He'll say she's lying. I'll say, okay, no, I'm not lying. And then we invite those 15 students and they say, like, and then we see who they are. But it was absolutely, it all went in another direction because the assistant of the director of that clinic called me by phone. And it started as I predicted. Like she said, like, we have a problem here. You were lying in your book. I said, okay. So you insist that Professor Demidov never brought 15 students to my ultrasound. She said, why? No, of course he did. He's a professor. He needed to show the interesting pathology to his students. No, why? Of course, yes, he brought. And then I asked, and what's the point? What is the lies? She said, okay, in your book you mentioned that you had to buy the plastic slippers. Slippers?
Yeah, slippers.
How?
Shoe covers. Shoe covers.
Shoe covers,
Shoe
right?
covers.
Plastic shoe covers, because in Russian, in governmental Soviet-style clinics, you always need a shoe cover. This protects your life. This is very important. So, and there was an issue with those shoe covers in the book because I wanted to the toilet. When you're pregnant, you need to the toilet more often than normally. So I wanted to the toilet, and they insisted that I should have those shoe covers. And in the book, I wrote that I first went to the toilet and then I bought them, which is kind of breaking the law in that clinic. And so she said, okay, you mentioned that you bought the shoe covers. That is a lie. I said, no, and I felt like guilty. I said, no, I swear I bought them. And I put them on, but after the toilet. She said, no. By the time you were, by that year, we already stopped selling shoe covers. We gave them for free. So.
I would like to ask a question about reaction, like reception. Reception. I remember at the time when the book came out, I read a lot of polemics and the Russian press. But right now, details sort of, I forgot many of them. The negative reaction in discussion by real critics, not by, chat rooms or they were both men and women. And
that's a good question.
What were the arguments?
That's a very good question. They were totally women. Maybe there was one man or two, I don't know, but like 99% were women. And most of them went through the same thing some time ago. What they were saying was that they went through that and they were silent because it's a normal thing to do. So they were furious about they were furious that I dared to talk about that, because they really they really tried very hard to be silent, not to not to betray the system of silence, which is necessary because it's a kind of Spartan ideology that if you are a person that is worth being respected, and if you are a brave person, if you are not a if you're not weak, if you're strong, and you need to be strong, you don't show your sufferings, and you need to keep it to yourself. Like in Sparta, you know, when the small fox is biting you, if you are a strong person, you don't need to show that. Like you should behave as if there is no fox biting your stomach. And this is the same because they really tried very hard to behave in a decent way, because that is what is decent in their perspective. And so they didn't feel that the purpose of my book was to somehow protect them. They felt that it was an insult, because it turned out that they also could talk about what they felt, and they didn't. And now I'm like, and who am I to do that? If they had no right, why do I have this right? Another thing was that they kept saying that I am I don't know. I don't know this. That I make a profit, but it's not the exact word. They make a profit out of my grief. But it was not. There is no monetarization. Huh? Yeah, that I was monetizing that is the word. I was monetizing my grief. And they didn't. I'm not sure they implied that they meant the money, because everyone knows that the writer in Russia gets no money for the book. Like it's a very funny amount of money you may, maybe if you're lucky you can go to the cafe for a cup of coffee and some dessert, but you can't monetize anything, not even your grief. But so it was not about money. It was about, I think I didn't understand it first. I tried to explain what I'm explaining to you, that the money is small, that no one in his mind would try to make financial profit out of it. But then I understood that they meant fame. Like my profit was being famous because of that story of grief.
Basically symbolic capital.
Yes, and that is what was also very insulting somehow for them. And the third thing was my being unpatriotic in this book, because I made a decision to go to Germany, because they said, okay, you did terminate that pregnancy, but not in Russia. You went to Germany because they give you nice smiles and they pretend to be polite with you and pretends to show some sympathy. But the point was that I insulted Russian doctors who never pretend. They say all the truth, but they have hearts of gold and hands also of gold, and I showed disrespect to them. And that I took the garbage out of the house, and here the house is the whole Russia, like because the book was translated, so that is a huge amount of garbage, which is now seen not only by your neighbor but also by someone like over the sea, which is, of course, a crime.
Do we have time? It's about 4 minutes. Okay. So we'll read a little bit. Okay, so we will read you the scene in the hospital in Germany, Hospital Charité, after much thought, and when you go to Germany, they don't, even if they say that you have the right to an abortion, it's clear that this is the medically correct thing to do, you still have to wait for 3 days. It's a 3-day waiting period, and everybody has to do that. It's just standard practice. So the 3-day waiting period is expired. They have not changed their mind. The baby is going to die, so they decide to go through with the abortion. And by the way, there was interesting, I was rereading the book again. There was an interesting point where you asked the doctor who gave the final diagnosis, what do most people do in this situation when the child is not going to survive? And he said most carry it to term. Yeah. But of course, if you think about that for a Russian in Germany, you're finding out it's 22 weeks. I mean, that's many, many months you would somehow have to stay in Germany because the Russians are refusing to treat you if you carry that child to term. In other words, even if it's a high-risk pregnancy and your life is in danger, they've told her they will not treat her if she decides to carry to term. So it's an economic question, and of course there's a daughter and back in Russia, and so they make the decision to terminate the pregnancy, and they go through with it, and they start taking the medications. And so this is in the labor and delivery room, which is amazing because your husband comes and stays, and that's not something that would have happened in Russia as well. After the third tablet, that's the third abortifacient, at 6 p.m., serious pain begins. On the nightstand next to my bed sit the stuffed dog and the meerkat, the talismans my daughter gave me to bring with me, but they don't help. I agree to the epidural, and in a couple of minutes, cold-eyed Kai, the anesthesiologist, comes into the room. They attach me to equipment that records my blood pressure and pulse. With an epidural during ordinary labor, that would also follow the fetal heartbeat. But in our case, no one worries about that. Kai prepares my back with something icy. Now he needs to place the needle in my spine with precision, and for that I need to sit still without moving. But I can't sit still. I writhe from the contractions and tremble heavily from fear. Not Sasha's exhortations, not his stroking, not regular breathing, not a sedative, not Kai's assurances that I'll just feel a light buzz like a mosquito bite. Nothing helps. Then the indifferent Kai manages an astonishing feat. I was in Moscow as a child, he says to me in English. I remember Moscow as having a large number of monuments. Ever since then, the question has bothered me. How many are there? Can you tell me even approximately the number of monuments in Moscow? Introducing the unexpected is, in my case, an excellent method of distraction. While I'm vaguely astonished at his heartlessness, what the hell is wrong with him? Monuments at such a terrible moment. While I nevertheless politely try to come up with a figure and consider what this person understands by the term monument, he's able to stick the needle where it needs to go. And he immediately loses all interest in the monuments of Russia's capital. But the pain goes away, quickly and almost completely. I continue to feel contractions, but already this isn't pain, just the shadow of pain. My legs feel slightly numb, as if I've been sitting on them too long. Kai says I can walk around if I want to, but only with support. But best of all would be to sit or lie down. Find something to occupy yourself with, he advises. Do you have a computer with you? Excellent. Watch a movie. Again, I am astounded by his heartlessness. When Kai leaves, the midwife checks my blood pressure and also leaves. Sasha falls asleep. It's instantly and without warning, as if he's been unplugged from a socket. I've always been amazed at his ability to turn off in stressful situations. And Natasha, my friend, and I sit silently for a little while and stare at my IV. And then she says, maybe we really should try to watch something. There's no internet at Charité. It's not possible to download or watch online. It turns out that the only film on my laptop is The Three Musketeers with Mikhail Boryarsky. At some time, I downloaded it for my daughter. And so Natasha and I sit on the couch in the German Charité clinic, me with an IV. I'm giving birth to a baby who'll never take a breath. His father sleeps like the dead next to me, and we watch The Three Musketeers, where they fence, fall in love, and drink. It turns out later that from that day forward and forever after, The Three Musketeers becomes the most frightening film I've ever seen in my life. I'll never watch it again. And the ditty about it's time to rejoice in life, and bye bye, feathers waving high, is the most terrifying song in the world, and I can't bear to hear it ever again. I'll turn off the sound if it's played in the children's radio channel. I'll leave the room if someone sings it. For me, it's a song about how unborn children die, and with them dies all the happiness in the world. For me, it's a song about how fate spits on your wishes. For me, it's a song about how my little son says bye-bye to me. But all that comes later. Now I simply stare at the screen and almost nod off and even almost forget why I'm here. And then, all of a sudden, in an instant, I remember. Because through the drowsiness, through the hat feathers waving high, through the painkillers, through my numb stomach, I suddenly feel that something inside me is tearing away and ceasing to live. Inside me is death. It's hot, slippery, red. It moves rhythmically inside me as if dancing. It wants to tear me open and come out. The baby's coming, I say to Natasha, and push the call button for the midwife. I'm sorry.
Close the conversation. Uh, if I may just switch to something present day, perhaps. Could you speak a little bit more about what it has been for us here in the past year or so? The in touching with the reader, but also perhaps leadership in Georgia among people who live there, but also local population. What is it like now for author?
Yes, well, me and my two kids, my daughter who's now 18 and my son who's 8, we moved immediately after the war started. Like we moved to Tbilisi in early February, or early March, I'm sorry. And more or less live there. At least that is our center. That is the center of our life by now. Well, it is a complicated place because, well, on the one hand, it is marvelous. It is warm. It is beautiful. It is the food is good. The people are mostly kind. Well, they have this very traditional inner law of hospitality, and it really works, even if they're not very happy that this crazy amount of Russians and Ukrainians appears in their rather small country in such a short time. But it is, well, you can feel very well that there is still that this is a territory, still a territory of a huge trauma, like this post-Soviet trauma of those countries who were abused by the regime, and for the one hand, this. For the other hand, there are people who fled from Ukraine there, and you meet them in the streets every now and then. Not only in the streets, like in some, I don't know, in